Let's talk about what is the first thing that you want to know?
Yeah, you described it kindly, but I would describe it more as my creative mess. Like, how do I build a creative business when I'm learning and growing new skills all the time? I'm constantly upskilling and experimenting, but it's sometimes hard to convince folks that I can do the new thing once I get enough experience with it. Just how do you sell and learn at the same time?
Sure. So let's start here. So tell me a little bit about what your business is now and maybe where you're hoping to head with it. And what are the skills you're talking about that you both have now and the skills that you're learning? So give me a little more context.
Sure. Yeah. I primarily do podcast editing now, meaning I clean up and do different things with the audio from mostly business folks' podcasts. However, I've also been doing some video editing over the last year, and I like that. And I have it for my own projects and my own podcast editing community as well. So I've been diving into more of YouTube optimization, different video editing skills, those kinds of things. So anything connected to the post-production or basically after recording part of podcasting, including podcasting as video, I'm getting my hands dirty with and have different levels of skills in all of them. So I'm doing all of that. And I'm constantly trying out different tools that can do the things better and clients sound better and look better and be found more and all of those things.
So let me ask you a question. Do you feel like, it sounds like from your question that you feel like these things are somewhat at odds with each other and you even describe it as a creative mess, but they actually seem relatively aligned because for the most part, all your clients are podcasters, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And you're just, and for that matter, I think you said mainly like business podcasts, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's just that the ways you're helping them are expanded, right? So maybe originally it was, I'll just edit your podcast, but now it's, I'll edit it and I'll get you on YouTube and I'll use this tool or that tool or whatever. Ultimately, it's helping the same people accomplish the same goal, correct?
It is, yeah. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's how do I get them to grow with me? And how do I get them to want to grow with me?
Getting existing. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How do you get your existing clients to utilize additional services you can offer? So for example, you have a podcaster who's hiring you to edit their podcast and you're like, hey, you should be on YouTube. We should be doing X, Y, and Z. I can do it for you. And they're saying to you, I don't care about YouTube. Is that sort of a piece of the issue?
Yeah.
Okay. With existing people versus bringing in new people who specifically want YouTube?
Either one would be fine, honestly.
Okay.
I don't care. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing I would say to you is learning more and adding more skills is never a problem. So that's ultimately a good thing. And ideally, you want to create a flywheel where the things you learn, the skills you develop, create new ways for you to help people. The experience you get helping those people leads you to learn and refine those skills, and round it goes, right? So I think that's the first thing, is to understand that it may feel a little scattered or frustrating, or you're like, you see a podcaster should be on YouTube, but your client doesn't see it or doesn't care. That's different from sort of these things being at conflict with each other. So I think part of it is you understanding in your own messaging and taking a step back. I feel like you're maybe a little focused on the tactics, seeing these as different things, but ultimately all client relationships and all consulting and all value for that matter is result driven. So people may be hiring you, forget the YouTube and the other stuff. If initially all you did was edit podcasts, in your mind, you might be going, people are hiring me to edit their podcasts. But actually the editing of the podcast is a tactic to accomplish the result they want. They're really hiring you because they want to have a successful podcast. They want it to sound good. They want to save their own time or resources or whatever. So these different tactics that you're offering are still helping them accomplish the same result in bigger and better ways. So part of that conversation is, let's say you have a conversation with an existing client who's paying you to edit their podcast. I think that conversation isn't, hey, I can also do YouTube stuff. You should do YouTube stuff. I think the conversation comes from a result point. You hired me because you want your podcast to be successful. Let's define what successful means. This YouTube thing is going to help you get more listeners. This YouTube thing is going to help you get the result you want. because where they're bogged down, they have their own preconceived notions about whatever, right? They might be going, I don't care about YouTube. I'm not focused on video. This is an audio podcast, whatever. But they do care about whatever the result is they want. More listeners, more exposure. And I think that's the way that you want to pitch it, as opposed to it's this different thing than what I'm doing for you. It's an extension and a way to get you to increase the likelihood that you get the results that you want. When you extrapolate it, goes into all your messaging from the very beginning, right? So that what you actually do, especially now that there's multiple ways that you can help people, is that you help business podcasts grow their audience, monetize, whatever, fill in the blank of whatever the result is that they want. So that when you have those conversations with new customers and when people are looking at you and going, what does she do? You don't want them to go, oh, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't want them to go, oh, she's just a podcast editor. Because then if you're quote unquote, just a podcast editor, you're commodified. There's a million podcast editors.
Right.
So I think what you actually want to do is position yourself as, I'm a person who helps these people get this result. And when they go, how do you do that? You go, there's a bunch of different ways I can do that. A, B, and C, right? Also will help differentiate you, because there's other people that maybe just do podcast editing. Now, part of your messaging, and I'm talking about new clients now and that kind of stuff, but part of your messaging to them, you're actually positioning yourself, I don't want to say against those other people, but you're differentiating yourself, right?
Sure.
So you're going, look, there's a lot of people out there you can hire to edit your podcast. But if you really want this result, you need more than a podcast. You need someone that can edit your podcast and put it on YouTube and do X, Y, and Z and knows how to do these things. I can bring all of that to the table, which ultimately is going to help you get more of what you want.
Yeah. Okay. So focus on the results, not the skills. I definitely have been focusing on the skills. And I think even my pricing page lists more of the details of the skills, not the results that they will get. So yeah, that is a repositioning for sure.
Yeah. The results and the benefits. And I think you want to look at the fact that you can do multiple things as a strength and a differentiation, as opposed to it's potentially confusing. The truth is and again, I'm making some assumptions here. So, you'll obviously have to think this through, but the truth is you probably, when you think about your sort of ideal client at this point, your ideal client is probably not someone that just wants a podcast, right? Your ideal client is someone that is focused on that result and willing to do what it takes to get that. And I think it creates a real opportunity for you to go, look, if you're just someone who wants to hire someone for X amount an hour or whatever to edit your podcast, go ahead. That's not me. I can do that. I'm focused on editing and all this stuff as a means to an end. And it's ultimately what they really want. But they they know the result they want, but they may not necessarily know. The average person that isn't in this space has no idea how important YouTube is to podcasts. So part of what you need to do is but they know they want a bigger audience. They want to be found in search and Google and all that stuff. So part of your job is to help them understand, I'm going to help you get the thing you actually want. You think you just need a podcast editor.
Yeah.
But that's not actually going to get you what you want. And that's where your story also, having gone through this yourself, you can be like, look, how long have you been doing this? Did you say 9 years
clients,
or something?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
For myself, 6, but for clients, 3. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been in this space for a long time. And that also creates an opportunity for you to relate to them and for you to say, look, this whole space has changed. Years ago, just having someone edit your podcast was enough for you to stand out. Now that's the baseline. The truth is, having someone edit your podcast is going to help you, but it's not ultimately going to get you what you want. It's just one piece. And I've gone through this transformation and realized that why I've learned all these skills. And that's why I'm on the sort of cutting edge of where this is all going. So if you just want to hire the person to do the thing that worked 5 years ago, go ahead. Like, I'm over here doing the stuff that works today.
That is a little bit scary, though, because it sounds like I'm promising all the success to them when there's so many factors involved. They're actually going to reach the podcast goal.
But let me ask you a question. If obviously there's a lot that you're not promising it. The podcast needs to be good. That it needs to be whatever. But this person's going to sit somewhere and record their podcast. They're going to put, even if they have lots of help and whatever, they're putting a lot of time and effort to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So they're already invested, forget financially. They are already invested in doing this. And if I were to ask you, if someone hires you only to edit the podcast versus edit the podcast and do the YouTube and the optimization and all the other stuff, which one has the better chance of success? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the quote unquote promise that you're making. You can say, look, I can't guarantee that you're going to be number one on the podcast charts. There's a million variables. I don't even know what show you're going to do. I don't know but what I can guarantee is you are going to get more out of the time and effort you're investing into this by doing this than you will if you just have an edited podcast. And the other thing, again, I'm channeling you if I were you, is I would also say, look, you don't necessarily need me to do that. I could just do the editing and you could do it yourself or find someone else to get you on YouTube and whatever. I'm just saying that anyone that's starting a podcast should be doing these things. You know, it's funny. I talk about a lot of times unrelated to podcasts, although it is comparable. I used to talk about this in terms of paid promotion and ads and stuff, right? It's amazing. Someone will put in 100 hours creating a thing, and then they won't spend $100 to get it in front of people to give it a chance to succeed. And I think that's what you want to remind people is like, they are even if it's just their time, they're heavily invested in doing this.
Yeah.
So don't you want to give it the best shot of succeeding? It's their choice, right?
Very
and
true.
that's what I mean, where you're not promising it's going to work, but I think you can, with a high degree of confidence, go, this is going to give you a much better chance than if you don't do it. And you can also point to look at all the successful shows. There's a reason they're all on YouTube. There's a reason there's a reason they're doing that stuff. So I think that's you can't guarantee results, but you can guarantee that you're going to help them have the best shot at getting what they want.
That feels really comfortable.
That all make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Cool.
That's a really good reframing.
Great. Cool.